Welcome to our LinkedIn Live session today. We're excited to be back with you, and we're going to be covering a couple of different topics today, but our main focus is around avoiding leadership pitfalls in operations. And so if you are joining us today live, we would love for you to drop any questions or comments in the chat or the comments area so that we can tackle those along with some of the things that we're planning on talking about. If you are watching this as a recording, you can do the same thing. Use the comment section to drop in your questions. We'll be monitoring those over the next few days and answer any questions that come up there as well. So appreciate you being here, your engagement along the way, but want to get things kicked off because our time is short. I'm happy to be joined by Eric Van Rukel today. Eric's been somebody I've known for a few years now. I have a lot of respect for his work in the operations field, and he serves in a number of different roles. He's worked in operations for a number of years after retiring, then has moved in as a consultant. And so excited to have you here, Eric, and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me. This is the first time I've done this, a live event like this. And so I appreciate your leadership and I appreciate what you do through your company every day too. I know you do a lot of training and you're recognized as a blue collar training organization, helping folks out in the role, on the floor, on the job, doing the work. And so that's, I think, how you and I linked up, and we both share in that same passion in developing people. So yeah, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And that's one of the things that linked Eric and I really off the bat was our passion for, production environments, operations, the people within there. And so I'm glad to have you, Eric, to give you a chance to share a little bit of your wisdom along the way.
Yeah.
So let's just jump straight in. As you've worked in operations environments, as you've now consulting with HR environments, what are some of the biggest challenges that you kind of see there that folks in leadership should be considering?
Yeah. So today, Joel, I want to keep it very simple. I'm a person that likes simplicity. So we can get as complicated as anybody wants to, but I'm going to start off simple. And what I'm seeing both within my career at P&G and post-career are the same things that I experienced during the parts of my career that I was in operations roles. And the two main pitfalls I want to focus on today for leaders, one is the lack of investment in their own energy and capability. They get into a mode where they give, and they don't take time to invest in their own energy and capability. And then the second big pitfall, I'm going to limit it to two. The second big one is not taking time away from the chaos or the operation to step back and think strategically about the state of their operation or the state of their organization and where they need to be moving in the future. As you just get sucked into the day-to-day, and it's difficult to step back and spend focused quality time thinking about that. So I just want to focus on those two areas today, if we could.
Yeah. And especially on the strategic side, Eric, where do you see, because I see that as well. I mean, we spend a lot of time helping people kind of deal with sometimes what they consider to be the tactical, the people relationships, the how do they lead their team well. But when we talk to them about strategy, sometimes they kind of give me a blank stare of like, what
does that even mean?
And what are the areas I need to be thinking about?
Yeah.
What would your counsel be to somebody like that? What are the areas that you think are most important?
Yeah. So in that second bucket then of taking time to step back and think strategically, what does that really mean? I'm going to keep it simple again, and I'm going to put it into three buckets in that area. So if you're keeping an outline, we've got two main, and now I've got three buckets under the second one. And I want to talk about people and process and technology, those three buckets. So you can write those three on a piece of paper: people, process, and technology. Those are not, I didn't invent those terms. I don't have them trademarked as a consultant. Those are industry standard terms. One of the companies I work for does a great job of focusing on those three things. So it's people, process, and technology. And so if you're going to when I say take time to think strategically, it could be a couple hours, it could be an afternoon, get away to a coffee shop, whatever that is for you, but it's just taking some time away to focus on that.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit of specifics within that on the people side. And I put them in that order on purpose, Joel, because I want to talk about technology in a minute, because that gets a lot of hype and et cetera. But I specifically want to do people, then process, then technology. On the people side, a couple things I think about. One is you look at your organization. Do you have an org chart? First of all, I've run into a couple of companies that don't have an org chart. I mean, they say, well, we're small enough, we kind of know who everybody is, but how do they relate? Who reports to who, and who's in charge of what, and what are their key responsibilities, et cetera. I think about, does each person know themselves? So do they know what their strengths and opportunities are? And do I know what the strengths and opportunity of my teammates are? So we can work together. And there's some really simple tools to get at that. And it's a lot of fun. But I find when I get into an organization, people don't necessarily know themselves, let alone know their teammates. And so how do we best work together? The second thing I think about under people is, are people in the right position? Jim Collins talks about the right people on the bus and then in the right seat on the bus. So what does that mean? So are they in the right role or the right position for them? And there's assessments for this. You don't have to do an assessment. You can just think, does this person seem to be enjoying what they're doing? If I ask them, does time go fast during the day, or does an 8-hour day feel like a 12-hour day? Does it feel just really, really difficult? Are they low energy? Do they have a bad attitude? Maybe an indication that they're just not in the right role. Are they in the right position? Do they understand their position in the organization? There's customer supplier relationships within an organization. We talk a lot about the customer that we're serving, the ultimate customer, but inside an organization, there's customer supplier relationships. And so do they understand that, that internally, when I do this is the impact it has on my downstream customer, whoever that is in the organization. So do they understand that bigger picture? And I mentioned there's a number, if you want to get more detailed, some evaluation processes, that can help with this. The EOS methodology, which I didn't know about until after I left P&G. Big fan. I've read the book, helped lead some of the implementation of different facets of that. But they have a really neat way to do that. Do they get it? Does a person get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? Patrick Lencioni in The Ideal Team Player talks about humble, hungry, and smart. So just list your people and put humble, hungry, and smart, and then just go down and give it a 1, 2, or a 3 or something, and do an assessment. Something really simple to say, where are the people at? How are the people in my organization functioning? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point here, because especially in operations, and depending on the level that a person's in operations, whether you're a supervisor, you're somebody that's maybe an operations manager, or maybe the director or plant manager.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we lose track of the people side of the business, which
Yeah.
sounds very weird, because a lot of us have a lot of the operations leaders may have 8, 10, 20 people reporting to them.
Yeah.
But the problem is we tend to focus on the tactical so much. What do we need to get done today? What are the to-do list items? What does my customer want? And don't get me wrong, all those are important.
Yeah.
But if I don't understand how my people are doing, are they developed in the way that they need to be developed? Are they, like you said, are they in the right seat on the bus?
Yeah.
These are the types of issues that tend to bubble up and create issues for all the other things, right?
Yeah.
If I don't have the right people, I tend not to meet my deadlines.
Yeah.
If I don't have the right skill sets on my team, it tends to create friction and tension. And so I love how you've kind of framed that up, because the people side can be so important for the day-to-day operations of a company.
And linking back to our overall premise here, the pitfall for operations leaders is, if I don't do that, then what happens? I rescue it. I find myself constantly rescuing those situations, resolving conflict between people, following up when something doesn't get done internally. It sucks energy and time out of me into very, like you said, tactical things. That takes me away from strategically leading the organization. So that's why you have to take some time to do that.
Yeah. I've often said that the best maybe assessment, we've talked about assessments, but the best assessment of a person's leadership is what happens when they're not there.
Well,
I hear so many leaders that'll come back, say, I can't take a day off, because if I do, I come back and everything's in chaos.
Well,
and the chaos typically comes from the people side.
Yeah.
Right? And so that should be an indicator that something's wrong there. And maybe I do need to step back, time block some time and be able to think about who are the people that need more of my attention, who are the people that are doing a good job that just maybe need my encouragement. And are there people within the organization that I'm starting to realize may not be a good fit?
That's a very
step away can be helpful.
That's a great point. I was thinking the same thing, actually. That's why I'm smiling. I was taught by a very wise leader who I replaced. I went into an organization and replaced that person. And he gave me some advice and he said, Eric, you should be able to not show up for 3 months and the organization just clicks right along. In fact, we joked about it may actually run a little bit better because you're not there distracting them. Now, eventually somebody needs to take a look at the longer term. Are we hitting budget? Are we meeting our goals long term, whatever, but not a day, not a week, but 3 months. And would the organization continue to sustain itself? Great point.
Yeah. Brittany Titcomb just put a great piece in here, a quote by Richard Branson. He said, take care of your people and your people will take care of your business. I think that's a fantastic reminder for us, again, in operations where we have a lot going on, a lot of time pressures. The people component of this is critical. And thank you for that, Brittany. Yeah. So let's go to that second one.
Process.
Talk about process. What should people be thinking about in terms of process and operations?
Yeah, a couple things. And I think of process on two different levels. So documented processes. So there's hundreds of processes that go into an operation, right? We all know that. And so those processes, when they start to break down, suck energy out of the leadership. You as a leader, you have to, again, intervene in those processes to manually, support them to push them up. And so I think about processes on a couple levels. There's processes that are needed to do the business. Like, do I know how to change over this piece of equipment? Do I know how to get this accounts receivable settled? Do I know how to solve this problem in an ERP system? Job aids, 1-point lessons, whatever you call them. Those are processes. But there's a higher level of processes too, like how does an organization make decisions? So if you're not there, what is the process we use to make a decision? Because now I'm in a position, I managed a couple operations that were 7-day, 3 shifts. So obviously there were times when I wasn't there. I also have a family and, a life outside of work. But so if they have to make a decision, it isn't call me, to weigh in to make that decision. I don't want to get that call 24/7. So how do we make decisions? And that could be decisions about the business. It could be decisions about staffing, et cetera. So there's lower level and then higher level processes. I think of 3 questions. You're going to hear a lot of 2 or 3 things from me, Joel, because I can usually remember that amount of things. But I have 3 questions that I was taught when it comes to processes. One is if you find yourself as an operational leader getting involved too much in the detail, ask yourself these 3 questions. One is, do we have a documented process for this? So I find myself now I got to go rescue getting this done. Is there a documented process? Do we have a documented process? The second question is, are we following it? So if we have a process, now I know I see you laughing, but seriously, I experienced this in my organizations. I'm seeing it, as I get, but are we following it? So do we have a process and are we following it? And then the third question is, if we have a process and we're following it, is it sufficient? Maybe the business has grown in complexity or whatever that the old processes aren't good enough. I want to tell you that, the Pareto principle, and I read this and then I found it to be true in my experience. If you do the first 2, if you have a documented process and you follow it, it solves 80% of the defects in your processes. Yep. It's rare. It's actually probably less than 20% of the time do we get to the third step where it's just not sufficient. It happens in mature organizations. But I'm amazed at the time so let me say how to make a decision. So the team at 2:00 in the morning has to make a decision. Do we continue to manufacture this product under the risk of a quality issue, or do we shut the operation down, which gets lots of visibility and cost, and we know what that takes. Well, is there a process they can pull out, a piece of paper, not 67 pages. It's not based on experience, tribal knowledge, who's there, who's not there, how do we feel, whatever. Here's the process of how we make a decision. Did they take the time to pull it out and follow it? So you can have it documented, but if nobody goes and gets it out of the 3-ring binder or something, but pull it out, maybe it's a checklist that forces you to say, I'm going to go through these steps. Did we follow it? And then the third step. If I came in the next morning and I found out that, hey, they pulled out the process, they followed it, and the decision wasn't exactly what I would have done, well, then let's take a look at the process. Maybe we need to short. But if they didn't take the process out and follow it, that's an expectation issue for my shift leadership, or the leaders in my organization. Hey guys, remember we agreed, we documented this process. We all agreed that you got to take it out and follow it. If you don't follow it, it doesn't do us any good.
Yeah.
And if there's no process and I get in the next day and I don't like the result, well, that's on me, right? That's a leadership issue. That is not an on the floor operational. That's a leadership issue to say, hey, whatever process I would have used or given the information I have, that needs to be documented so we can give that gift to people and say, hey, you've got the same information I do. Here's how you make that decision. Yeah.
And I find there's an interesting pinch point for leaders in operations in that quite often when processes are built, they finally get them down on paper. So we have, kind of answer. The first one is yes, we have one.
Yeah.
And quite often, maybe not always, but they can answer number two as, people are for the most part following it. The issue that we see is they've built themselves into the process so much that they create a bottleneck, right? Yeah. They create inefficiency. They don't allow people to kind of step in and take ownership at 2 a.m. in the morning and say, hey, based on this process and the fact that Eric's given me the authority or the ability and responsibility to make a decision without him, that you're not getting a call at 2 a.m. in the morning, waking me up to make a decision.
Right.
We're finding out the next day that, hey, we shut down the line because we didn't know what to do and you weren't available. And now you got a bigger business problem. So I think when I talk about pinch point, I think we've got to be considering as we build those processes, who's responsible, right?
Yeah.
What level of freedom do people have in making those decisions when, the 20% of the things that aren't documented happen?
Yeah.
But also looking at the process and saying, if everything has to flow through me, I'm creating something that can't operate 24/7, right?
100%.
Or 12/5, like whatever the shifts are. It's important for us to consider that at a higher level. And so that's why I love when you talk about taking the time to think through strategy. I think that's a critical piece of it.
Well, and the organization's only going to grow, or the business is only going to grow to the level of the capability of the leader, right? And then it's going to be constrained. And that's a terrible position to be in as a leader, as an operation. It sounds good on the surface because they need me. They can't live without me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think I'm valuable to the company. My job is secure. They're going to value me. That can be positive. The negative of that is the stress and the spiral, that you get into, because then as the business grows and your capability is limited, I don't care who's watching this, I'm going to just tell you, your capability is limited. Some are higher, some are low, but it's limited. Eventually that business is going to reach your capability and it's going to try to push beyond. And that's a very difficult position to be in. You have to figure that out, how to deliver results through an organization. And we can talk about, at some point in the future, growth mindset or trust. I can throw out this quip like, you should be able to be gone for 3 months and nobody would notice. Well, what if I come back and they decide they don't need me? Because that's a whole other topic. I grew up in an organization where there's trust, that there's a whole nother level of things to be working on. If I'm found that I'm not needed on the minute to minute, day to day, hour to hour business, there's a whole bunch more stuff we could go do as a business. And I've found that in the companies I'm consulting with post P&G too. They'd love to grow. There's all kinds of stuff that the owners or the leaders want to go do. They just currently feel constrained by something.
Yeah. So, the piece that I often come back to here is too many leaders get sucked into the firefighting mode. And whether it's because of process or people or whatever else. And they need to start thinking more about you're not a firefighter. You run the fire department, right? You're the fire chief, and other people can put out the fires. You have to think strategically about who needs to go where and what resources they need, and potentially like, why do we keep fighting the same fires, right? But if you're sucked into the day-to-day firefighting all the time, you're doing your team and the organization an injustice, and we need to push to fix it.
I found, Joel, I separately, if anybody's interested in how to do a 1-day sabbatical, I actually reached out to a pastor of mine one time to say, hey, I don't have time to take a week right now. I think my wife would kill me, if I took a week. But if I want to take a day and do a sabbatical and just think strategically, how would I do that? You bring up a good point. As operations leaders, we can become adrenaline junkies. You just go from one fire to the next. And that's actually, that those fires provide the energy and the adrenaline. And then you get to the end of the day and, you can crash. The difficulty with thinking strategically is you got to let that adrenaline come down. You got to, stop going 8,000 RPMs, reset, and think strategically. That takes a chunk of time to do that. And I found a day, by the time I take a couple hours and calm down, spend 2 or 3 hours of quality time, thinking strategically, and then give myself a chance to ramp back up. Doing that in less than a day is difficult, I think.
Yeah. So let's go to that third topic.
Yeah, the third one,
let's talk about technology. As you mentioned, technology, there's a lot of buzz, people talking about AI and different software tools and technology tools.
Yeah.
As you counsel operations leaders, what do you help them focus in on around technology?
Yeah, it's an amazing time, isn't it? And going back just a second, I'll be showing my age a little bit, but I can remember pre-spreadsheets, pre-Excel. So believe it or not, there was a world before Excel. There was a world before computers. When I started, I didn't have a dedicated computer. I know, I'm sorry, I'm reminiscing a little bit. Made it easier to be out on the floor, no cell phones, et cetera. So the last 35 years have just been an unbelievable advancement in technology, let alone ERP systems, right? And scheduling and the internet came along, and that allows us to do things globally. Cell phones came along, which allows an operational leader now to be connected 24/7, even to get real-time data on their phone of what's happening in the operation and not even personally have to be there, to be in meetings like this, and not even have to be there in person. The next big sexy thing is AI. I get a couple of AI emails every day just to stay up on the technology, the advancement. Here's the challenge, I think, and I see this happening with AI. Companies are thinking if we just install the technology, that'll fix the problem. So let's lead with technology, and the people in the process will have to just follow along. And that's not the way it works. That's why I talk about people, process, and technology. So here's the way, if you're an operational leader, I would think about technology. So in the past, it was those things I mentioned. In the future, it could be AI or manufacturing execution system technology, MES, ERP. A lot of companies I'm helping install ERP systems, et cetera. One is, which processes are we trying to improve? So let's go back to that process mapping. As we look at the challenges in our organization, and we find ourselves relying on these processes, which processes are we trying to improve by installing this technology? And if you can't tell which one those are, then you got to be careful with just throwing in technology. And then as you install the technology, how is this going to improve the work life, and the productivity of the people that are doing the work? And so obviously they need to be involved in the evaluation of that technology and the processes that we're trying to automate. An ERP system's a good thing. A lot of companies were forced to install an ERP system because they outgrew QuickBooks or whatever else. And so they bought one off the shelf and just rammed it in and didn't necessarily talk to the people on the floor to say, when we do this, how is this going to impact you? And I've seen one example where now it took people 30 minutes a day to log their time into this system. Like, what hours did I work? And it started out, it took them upwards of 30 minutes just to tell the system, here's what I worked today, because of the slowness of the technology, et cetera. So, what processes are we automate? How does it affect our people? And then what business results are we expecting? What ROI are we expecting as a result of installing this technology? What's going to be the benefit? And do we have a way of assessing, are we delivering that benefit? So AI for AI's sake, for instance, you look at it and say, well, it can spit out these answers and now I don't need this person anymore. You have to put the right information into AI in order to get reasonable, results. And so what I would say, rather than just cutting people with technology, just taking a productivity gain or cutting the people out, how do we elevate the ability of people to manage in the organization and make decisions as a result of benefiting them with this technology? And the people, getting back to the people side, I'm amazed that people's capability elevates, to deliver a higher set of business results. So we could talk a long time. I don't want to get into a rabbit hole about AI or technology or whatever, but I put them in those three orders and be very conscious about what processes are we improving and how is this going to benefit the lives and the productivity and the impact of my people on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I'll echo something you said there. I think, and I thought you did it beautifully around the technology is going to depend on the people, right, and the processes. But where I see technology having the greatest benefit in workplaces like that is where we understand our process well, and
Yep.
the technology is supposed to help us do the good things that we want to do on a regular basis,
Yep.
faster, easier, better, and it keeps us from falling in to some of the bad habits or things that are going to get us derailed, right?
Right.
So in some ways, it's a little bit of guardrails, but it's also encouraging us, or it's providing more opportunities for us to track the things that we want to be doing, to execute those processes faster, to get the right resources in the right places. But to your point, I think some companies look at it and say, we have a inventory problem. Let's get an inventory software, right?
Yeah.
Instead of understanding, well, do we even have an inventory process, or do we have the
Process.
right people actually doing inventory?
Yes.
It's without those two, you have a great system that's going to be essentially invalidated by the processes and people trying to run them.
100%, Joel. And that's why I just want to go back to people, process, technology. And I do see with AI now, with ERP systems, there's a trend. Let's throw the technology out there and just hope it fixes the other two. And it won't. It could make it worse, actually. Like I mentioned earlier, make it worse. Yeah.
Well, I see we're running short on time. We do
Yeah.
want to give an opportunity if people do have questions. I haven't seen any come in yet. I do see a comment here from John
Yeah.
about
John
his
and I work together. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to agree. You know, there are a number of organizations that just focus on the bottom line, and they just expect people and processes to follow suit. And I think that the hard part about that is, don't get me wrong, the bottom line, the dollars, the revenue, the efficiency, all those things are important, but they're metrics that actually are giving you maybe some insight into how those other things are working, right?
Yeah.
The people on the process side. And goes back a little bit again to Brittany's comment about if you take care of your people, the business will take care of itself. When you don't take care of your people, you tend not to be able to hit those big metrics that you want.
100%. You know, last week I was talking to an individual that I'm coaching, and we were talking some of these soft elements like we are today, people, process, technology, et cetera. I do want to be clear that in an organization, to me, again, I'm going to put two things. You got to do two things to be a successful operations leader. You have to do two things. One is you have to deliver results. We are here to deliver results. Let's not kid ourselves that it's not about delivering whatever that is for you, profit, revenue, growth, volume, whatever it is. We have to deliver results, or there is no organization. There is no company. You know, there's no people, there's no process, there's no technology. And number two, we have to build organizational capability so that we can continue to deliver better results. The good news is that's a virtuous cycle. If I build organizational capability, I deliver better results, which allows me to go build organizational capability, which I can deliver results. We talked about how to do that, you know, people, process, but I don't want to short circuit it. You have to deliver results, or you won't be an operations leader for very long.
Right.
The other thing, Joel, while we wait for some comments to come in, I just want to take a minute. My first point about operations leaders is not investing in your own energy. Everybody's heard about the airline oxygen mask, where you're on the plane and they tell you to put your own mask on before you do with your kid or somebody else. And that's not, necessarily intuitive. As an operations leader, you have to do that. I found operations leadership, it's a net drain on you. Maybe there's some people that gain energy, ongoing, you might from day to day, but overall, there has to be something, you have to be investing in your own energy in order to give that energy to the organization. So spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, and mentally is an area that's gotten a lot more focus in the last 5 or 10 years. My generation was not necessarily focused on mental health, but we're realizing now, especially with all the technology that we brought in, how important mental health is and capacity in order to be an operational leader. So I could talk a lot more about that. We focused more on the people, process, technology today, but investing in your own energy so you have the ability to lead the organization is critical, or you're going to have to tap out at some point.
Yeah. Well, that's the time we've got today. I want to thank Eric again for his comments, thoughts, and wisdom that he shared today. If you're looking for opportunities to improve your operational environment, Eric, as I mentioned earlier, does a lot of consulting in that space, serves as a fractional COO, with some organizations across Iowa. If you have interest or want more information from him or have questions that we didn't get a chance to cover today, please reach out to Eric on LinkedIn and he'll take care of you. If you're looking for ways to develop your frontline leaders and focus in on that kind of the people side of the business, I'd be happy to talk to you about training and coaching opportunities that we can provide in your workplace to create a program that's customized to your needs. So with that, appreciate you all being here. Looking forward to our next LinkedIn Live. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Joel.